is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, May 5th. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to DDA's Appendix K guidance. Thank you for joining us today. We have several presenters today. First, Patricia Sastoki, Director of Programs, Rhonda Workman, Director of Federal Programs, Valerie Roddy, Director of Fiscal and Operations, Mary Jane Asazuwa, IT Functional Analyst Supervisor. Also, we have Stacy Jones, Acting Director of Quality Enhancement, Peter DeFries, Director of Operations, Ron Peel, Budget Director, and Casey Brown, Federal Billing Administrator. All participants are in listen-only mode. There is one option for listening to the webinar, and that's by computer. We have a handout which is loaded in the handout section of the platform in the panel to your right. We're recording the webinar today, and that will be posted on our website. And questions can be typed in the question box in the panel to your right. And we'll be answering questions throughout the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Patricia Sastoki. Good morning.
Good morning, Donna. Thank you, and welcome all of you to today's Appendix K webinar. Is our first of 3 that we're going to be doing this week. And so Valerie and I would like to welcome you all to this week's series of webcasts in reference to Appendix K. And as you all know, our Deputy Secretary Bernard Simons has instructed us to create operational guidance to implement Appendix K. So we try to streamline and make it as simple, as easy as possible, knowing our constraints with our current PCIS2 system. While some of you may not think it's perfect, it is what we could do with the short notices and the flexibility and what we heard from some of you, and the knowledge that you already have in using PCIS2. So today you will hear from several members of operations and programs. They have been working hours, weekends to put this together for you and to make sure that we really are as flexible as possible. We are also opening to hearing your questions and your recommendations after today's webinar and this week's webinars. But first, I want to make sure that you know that DDA's highest priority is the health, safety, and well-being of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, their families, staff, people in self-direction, people in micro boards, and providers like you. You've heard this from the Deputy Secretary on his Friday webinars, and we really want to emphasize that today. Our agenda today, as you know, we're going to be talking about the retainer payment guidance. We're going to be talking about the residential daytime share service hours authorization, and we're going to be talking about the personal support authorization and expectations, as well as the increased rate for supporting people with COVID-19. So, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answers. But after each section, we're going to do a poll of maybe 2 or 3 questions, and then we want to engage and ask and talk with you and hear your questions specific to that topic. Some of you already started putting questions in the question box. So we're going to try to stick to the topic that we're going to be talking about and then open it up for questions, ask maybe 3 or 5 questions. Please know that all of your questions are going to be populated. They're going to be answered, and then they're going to be posted on the DDA website. So I'm going to see if Valerie wants to say anything to you, and then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda Workman, our Director of Federal Programs. Valerie, would you like to say anything before we turn it over to Rhonda?
No, I just would like to say good morning and thank you for all of the hard work that we know is going on during this challenging time. We are indeed trying to be as helpful as we possibly can be. But with that, always know that certainly as we move through this presentation this morning, that we at DDA are available to answer questions, and we do have some follow-up links and ways to contact us. Because we know that this is a lot and some of this is different than what we normally do business. but we want to make it as easy as possible. So please know that if you do have a question or need further assistance, we are more than willing to work with you here at DDA. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rhonda. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie and Patricia, and good morning, everyone. Our first topic that we're going to talk about today is retainer payments. Next slide, please. So retainer payments are for direct care staff and providers who normally provide services that include habilitative services and personal care, but are currently unable to provide the service due to health and safety risks, state mandates, complications experienced during this pandemic, maybe because the participant is sick and actually has contracted the virus, and or the participant is isolated or quarantined based on state, local, federal, or medical requirements. They are available under both our self-directed and our traditional service delivery model. And within our approved Appendix K, we have a retainer payment have been authorized for our employment services, including supported employment, additional services such as our community development services, career exploration, rehabilitation, personal support, and also our residential services for community living group home and supported living services. Under the traditional model, our meaningful day and our residential services are limited to up to 18 days per calendar year. Our meaningful day services are reimbursed at 80% of the rate, and personal support is limited to 72 hours. Under the self-directed service delivery model, meaningful day retainer payments are up to 108 hours. The participant, as the employer of record, must authorize and approve retainer payments for their staff. Retainer payment limits are per service regardless of the number of staff. Please note that if a provider or a participant under the self-directed service delivery model is paying legally responsible individuals, relatives, friends, direct support professionals, or other qualified individuals to provide services, even in alternative locations, they should bill as if the service was provided by the staff in the normal location and not bill as a COVID-19 retainer payment. Next slide, please. As per CMS guidance and discussions with Medicaid, we have updated our guidance related to community living, group home, retainer payments, and our at-a-glance tool. This update was completed on May 3rd. COVID-19 retainer payment places the residential retainer fee noted within the DDA's Community Pathways approved waiver. It is not in addition to the residential retainer fee, and therefore we have been advised that we cannot combine the days. As per CMS directive, retainer payment time limit may not exceed the lesser of 30 consecutive days or the number of days which the state authorized a payment for bed holds in nursing facilities. Information related to this federal requirement can be reviewed in the CMS Olmstead Letter number 3, which was issued in July of 2000. Therefore, a provider for community living group home services can only seek payment up to 18 days for retainer payments per calendar year. Next slide, please.
This is Mary Jane. So this slide is the retainer payments for community living, also known as residential in PCIS2. To bill for retainer payment, this screen it's a traditional calendar for our billing process. So providers are expected to use the appropriate codes. Currently, the new COVID-19 code is effective March 13th, as you can see on the slide, and the code is the C code that is used. For community living, home supportive employment, community development services, career exploration, and rehabilitation, these retainer codes are used for the billing. The code, the letter C is what needs to be used to applicable for this billing. And if you've already certified your site, please, you can update your attendance again. And once you've updated your attendance, you can click on recertify and the system will take the new changes. Next slide. This slide is for day habilitation as well, similar to community living / residential. This calendar is also using the C code for your billing, and the billing effective starts on March 13th. Next slide. This slide is for supportive employment, also using the C code for COVID-19 retainer days, which is for supportive employment. And we also start on the 13th of March, so you can also update your attendance and click on recertify if you've already certified your attendance. Next slide.
Hello everyone, this is Casey. Currently, supported living is billed using the Community Pathways non-FPS services invoice using rates calculated in PCIS2. For the supported living retainer payment, you'll see we've updated the invoice to include a new service called COVID-19 Supported Living Retainer Payment. So to bill the retainer day, you will choose the service and bill the current rate authorized in PCIS2 for the person and submit the invoice to the regional office as you normally would, along with the 1500 form. Next slide.
Personal support. This is a retainer days for personal support. The personal support services, there are two calendars in PCIS2. One is the authorized service base calendar, and the other one is the COVID-19 retainer calendar. And the retainer hours can be entered on the same day as actual service hours based on typical service pattern. Retainer hours may be submitted if the day has been indicated as isolated day. Personal support retainer hours are limited to 72 hours. Next slide.
So under our self-directed service delivery model, participants, as the employer of record, shall send authorization for retainer payments to the FMS provider. Participants enrolled as the self-directed service delivery model will determine on a case-by-case basis staff they will authorize retainer payments for. The fiscal management service provider should work with the participants to adjust the rates for meaningful day retainer services by reducing the rates to 80% of the usual authorized rate. The fiscal management service provider will need to submit a claim for the retainer days using the new procedure codes for day habilitation, community development services, and supported employment. The DDA will send the new procedure codes directly to the fiscal management service providers. Next slide, please.
So guidance for the fiscal reporting on COVID-19 related fee payment system services expenditures will be provided in the fiscal year 2020 cost report instructions at a later date. Those instructions are usually issued in the fall around September or October. The instructions will be updated to accommodate the flexibility granted by CMS for service authorization exceptions and the additional cost associated with COVID-19 state of emergency. As part of the fiscal reporting related to COVID-19 expenditures, providers will need to identify and include any funds received through the Federal Payroll Protection Program in the cost report and in the audited financial statements. This requirement also will be reflected in the cost report instructions to be released in the fall. Next slide.
So this is where we are going to be asking, doing a poll, and then we're going to be opening up to questions specific to the retainer payments. So can a provider seek payment for more than 18 days for retainer payments per calendar year? We're giving you a few seconds to respond. Next poll, Donna. Can a provider seek payment for more than 18 days for retainer payments per calendar year? Can you go to the next one? Okay, so I'm going to open up the lines here for some questions specific to retainer payments and between operations and programs. Let's try to answer this. So do you mean to say that the providers have now lost the 30 days and are only getting 18 days? What happens to the 33 days? Can someone explain that to us? Rhonda, would you like to answer that?
Yes, yes, Patricia, absolutely. So this is Rhonda Workman. This is correct. As per our federal guidance and instructions, we are limited to up to 18 days currently. So therefore, we are not able to continue to authorize residential retainer fees for up to 30 days. So effective immediately for retainer payments for community living and our meaningful day services, as we've shared in this presentation and our guidance, is limited to up to 18 days per calendar year.
Rhonda, can you share when the DDA was informed of such decision?
Yes, we had conversations over the weekend related to this requirement with Medicaid, and CMS guidance was provided during our Appendix K discussions and requests. Our Medicaid office clarified this weekend that we are limited.
Thank you. So our next question is, they're all about retainer days and the 18 days. I think a lot of people have lots of questions about that on the retainer days. We have not had 33 hours in about 7 years. I mean, 33 days, it's been 30 days. And now with the Appendix K and having to follow the requirements of what we have in the nursing home bed holes, we have to then now go to the 18 days. So the DDA is looking at how do we consider, what do we do for people who are already going above and beyond those 18 days? And we will provide further guidance as we go through this. Next question on retainer days. Let's see.
I just launched the poll.
That's okay, no worries. Let's just ask the question, keep asking questions that I'm reading from the chat boxes. You can go ahead and take the poll down from the screen if you like, Donna. All right, I'm asking one more questions about retainer days as we are looking through the chat box and specific to retainer days. And so some of the
Patricia?
questions is, yes?
Patricia, just to add, related to information shared from our Medicaid office, Marlena Hutchinson did present at our recent Quality Advisory Council meeting on April 23rd, information related to retainer payments and the statement that we are limited currently to 18 days.
Thank you, Rhonda. All right, so most of the questions here have been about the 18 days and the 30 days, and then there is a question about self-direction. Staff on self-direction can only have 80% of the PTO, correct? And we're going to talk about self-direction during tomorrow's webinar. So I'm just looking to see if there's any more here. Where receipts of PP impact what we can get for the retainer payments. Valerie, would you like to answer that?
Oh, so the question about the payroll protection program, we are interested in knowing which providers received it and how much, because I know some providers have applied and did not receive it, but then again, we know that some providers have been successful. We would like to have that information at this point in time. We are only looking at information. No decision has been made whether or not it would impact the retainer fees.
Valerie, there's also some other questions in reference to why is this on a calendar year when everything else is on a physical year? And this goes back to the 18 days.
This goes back to the 18 days, and this is how it is set up in by CMS. That it's not a state decision, but rather a CMS decision.
So to clarify a little bit more with that question, the 18 days per calendar year is what Maryland has for its nursing facility bed hold days. So it's our requirement within our state plan. It's 18 days per calendar year.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next topic, and then towards the end, we'll just mix all the questions so we can make sure that you can get some of the answers. Again, we're going to post this on the DDA website so that you can get the answers to each of the questions. Thank you.
So now let's talk a little bit about our residential daytime shared service hours authorization. In circumstances where our meaningful day services cannot be provided due to the state executive orders, including the closure of our day programs in schools, and Governor Hogan's stay-at-home executive order in March, the DDA is authorizing a set amount of shared daytime service hours to support the additional staffing our residential provider organizations are providing via our community living group home and supported living services. In these situations, a new person-centered plan is not required. Shared add-on service hours will be added to one person in each home where at least one participant is currently receiving meaningful day services and will be based on the number of people that are supported in the home. So up to 8 additional hours in a home serving 3 people will be provided for a total of 40 hours. Up to 16 additional hours in homes serving up to 5 people for an additional 80 hours. And up to 24 additional hours in a home serving 8 participants for a total of 120 hours. The authorization will be made via data patch in PCIS2 by the DDA staff. Next slide, please.
So the billing for community living will be the same. You will continue to enter attendance into the PCIS calendar using any of the codes for any of the payable days. It can be a P day, a V day, isolation day, or a C for a retainer day. All of these, if these are put in for a particular person in the home who is assigned the additional hours, then the provider will receive the additional payment for those additional hours. For supported living, please complete the current invoice process, and the payment will include the additional shared hours that have been allocated. Next slide.
We recognize that there may be circumstances when both our meaningful day services and our residential providers will be submitting a claim for the same periods of time and be paid. Meaningful day services can be provided remotely while residential service staff are present. We issued some information related to telehealth and telephonic guidance in the COVID-19 number 6 correspondence from the Secretary. During this situation, to support the participant's health, residential staff will be available at the site when remote supports are being provided in case the participant needs assistance with personal care, maybe some behavioral intervention or nurse delegation supports. Providers may also decide to use meaningful day staff or partner with another meaningful day provider to use that provider's staff to meet their residential service needs. In this situation, the COVID-19 retainer payment can be billed for the meaningful day services while the staff are actually providing residential services. The meaningful day provider can submit a claim for retainer payment, and the residential provider provides daytime shared hours and submits a claim for those services. Appendix K also provides the option to support people in alternative settings, such as homes of the family member. Therefore, a meaningful day provider could provide services remotely, and the residential provider could submit a retainer day. However, it's important to note that if a person was authorized for residential dedicated one-to-one support prior to the emergency crisis, in other words, they were receiving funding for supports in lieu of meaningful day services for specific days of the week, then the meaningful day provider should not bill for those days. Next slide, please. It is not necessary to do a modified service funding plan or to request residential dedicated support, in other words, in lieu of day. There are no forms that you're going to need to complete. The DDA will coordinate with the coordinators of community services and pilot providers in order to ensure that they're able to bill and access these services. Additional authorization to address a participant's specific need, in addition to what these authorized hours are, may be requested based on the person's needs using a new service authorization request form and process. If the participant who have shared or dedicated hours authorized is no longer eligible for the residential retainer payment, then the provider shall contact the DDA to coordinate the allocation of additional hours to another participant in the home as the makeup of the home has since changed. Next slide, please.
So I wanted to just share with the group who's listening and joining us today that we didn't put every word on a slide because all this information is already on at the glance or either in the website under Appendix K, specific line by line item and step by step. And we really wanted to just give you the highlights here today and then be able to answer some of your questions. So a lot of questions popped up on here. So let me just get to your questions as opposed to doing our poll here. Several are about the sharing of the hours. So in a house where 16 hours are assigned, will it be assigned to one or multiple people in the home?
This is Valerie, and it will be assigned to.
Valerie, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. It will be assigned to one person in the home.
Can you tell us how would the provider choose that one person?
DDA has already done an extract of the data, already identified an individual within each home to be assigned the additional hours. So the providers can take any action.
So in summary, the providers will not need to worry about this because the DDA has already auto-populated the component of the house and they wouldn't have to do anything. It would be an automatic action.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. When can we expect the share hours to be added in PCIs 2? We're going to talk about that as we go through today's presentation. If someone used 25 days during quarter 1 and quarter 2 of FY20, that will not affect the 18 days because of that is different calendar year. Oh, this is an 18. I'm sticking to specific this presentation, so I'm skipping all anything that has to do with the 18 days or the 30 days. Can we bill a present day for each individual in our day residential program so all the 3 people in the home who would have been in our day program?
Patricia, can you repeat that question?
Yeah. Can we bill a present day for each individual in our day/residential program. So all 3 people in the home will have been in our day program. So I think the question is, can they bill for the day program for under residential, or can they bill under day for residential if they were in a different setting?
I think there's multiple responses to this question. So one, the day program provides an hour of service for telehealth, which is already was discussed, I know, on Friday and is contained in the guidance. Then the provider can bill for that day. So it can be a present day. If the day provider does not provide any service at all, then the day provider cannot bill that day. You have the option, if they have not already used the 18 retainer days, could use a retainer day for a day on which no services were provided.
Thank you, Valerie. Can you clarify if a person in a community living group home is receiving in lieu of day prior to COVID, what happens for the other 3 individuals in the home for the in lieu of day? I think, Rhonda, you talked about it. Can you answer that?
I'm sorry, Patricia, can you repeat that one more time?
Can you clarify if a person in community living group home is receiving in lieu of day prior to COVID, what happens for the other 3 individuals in the home for their in lieu of day?
Yes, that's a good question. So the other individuals would still be eligible for those additional hours of shared daytime hours. My point in my discussion was that if that one person was already authorized dedicated hours in lieu of meaningful day, then the day program could not be, or the meaningful day service could not also bill for those services.
Can you talk about the difference about between isolation day and COVID-C day?
Yes, I think we're going to talk about the isolation day in a few slides about the increased rate.
What will the rate be for the share hours? So some of this people are asking through, and I think that let us get through today's presentation and we'll go through it. So I'm just kind of going through this piece as I'm reading everybody's questions. Go ahead, Valerie.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So the rate that's being paid for the additional hours is based on the add-on rates for individuals in community living.
Can the provider bill for up to 72 hours per month for personal supports? And we're going to talk about the personal support sections, but go ahead.
Yeah, the 72 hours related to personal supports retainer payments is total. It's not per month, it's not per week, it is total. It's like the 18 days per calendar year, it's 72 hours per calendar year.
Okay, I'm just reading. I just want to make sure I get the most of the questions here. I'm still not clear. Will the 8 hours apply per individual?
It applies to one individual within each home. So the 8 hours are not applied to each person in the home, but rather it is applied to one person within the home, because again, these are shared hours.
Okay, thank you. Can the day provider provide 1 hour in the residential home?
Yes,
If a person is receiving meaningful day services during the day and lives in a residential home, can we bill present?
yes. As we've shared, services can be provided in alternative settings to include services being provided in a residential site when meaningful day services are provided.
Okay. If someone was absent from residential for 30 days last calendar year between July 1st and December 31st, 2019, they should still be able to get the 18 retainer days since this is a new calendar year, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to read 2 more and then we'll go to the next chapter. In terms of share hours, residential providers, are they actually billing for day hours present, or is that the additional 8, 16, 24 hours depending on the size of the house? At the same time, the day provider can bill present if another organization is providing actual day services. Is this correct?
Yes.
Yes, let me repeat the answer to make sure. The answer is if the 8 hours or 4 hours of additional shared hours are added to the home, so that as the provider bills for those days using the P for the present day, they will get paid for that particular individual in that particular home who has the additional hours assigned to them. They will be paid for those additional hours at a, obviously at a higher payment. Meanwhile, if a day provider provides 2 hours of services on the same day through the telehealth approval or mechanism, then yes, the day provider can also bill for that day as a present day.
Okay, there's lots of questions in this section, Valerie and Rhonda. And so what I'm gonna do from just hearing the questions is probably recommend that EDA do another, once everybody goes and looks at the calendars, hear today's presentation, go back and review. We may need to do another specific webinars to this specific section on the 14, 16, and 20 days, hours, because everybody's asking lots of questions about that piece. But let's continue going through the presentation and see if it clicks here and there, because we're broken it down in different sections. I'm going to read one more, and then we'll go to the next chapter. Does the retainer payment come out of the approved self-directed budget?
Yes.
All right, let's move to the next chapter.
So our next chapter is about personal supports authorization and exceptions. And it's outlined in our guidance number 3. And so there are some exceptions that are outlined for personal support services, to include the ability to provide services in a variety of settings, that personal care assistance can comprise the entirety of the service as appropriate, and when appropriate, services can be delivered remotely through telehealth, as we've been talking about, using real-time audio-visual connections that allows the staff member to both see and hear the participant. Personal care services that only require verbal cueing, the ability to hear a verbal response from the participant, can also be delivered by the phone. There are various staffing qualifications and onboarding flexibilities that are outlined in our guidance number 6, and that includes the option to waive training for family members. As already presented, retainer payments may be authorized for personal supports up to 72 hours per calendar year. Next slide, please. Effective March 13th, the DDA has authorized additional service hours when the participant was receiving meaningful day services prior to the state of emergency. When this authorization is specific to participants that currently receive 28 hours or more of personal supports per week. They will automatically be authorized for 6 additional hours per day from Monday through Friday to account for the meaningful day service programs being closed, for a total of 30 hours per week. For participants currently authorized to receive personal supports using the traditional service delivery model, the DDA will authorize additional hours via data patch and PCIS2. No further action is needed by the provider. For participants currently authorized to receive personal supports using the self-directed service delivery model, the DDA will inform the fiscal management service provider of the participants that are authorized these additional hours. For non-pilot participants, modified service funding plans and revised person-centered plans are not required to access these authorized hours. Next slide, please. For participants that have additional assessed needs for personal support hours, or for participants that currently do not meet the criteria of receiving the additional 30 hours as noted on the previous screen, they can request an increase in personal support hours or request to access personal support using our service authorization request form or use the revised cost detail sheet. Next slide, please.
So to access the payments for these services, providers can enter the regularly authorized services into the base calendar. For self-direction for the billing process, there is no change to the billing processes. Invoices should be sent to the fiscal management services provider, as is done currently. Next slide, please.
The personal support attendance screen now has 3 personal support calendars, as you can see. Base calendar for the regular authorized units plus new additional units, retainer calendar, and the isolation calendar. To enter units on the days of isolation, the checkbox function on the new PCIS2 isolation calendar to indicate which days the person was in isolation. The days identified as isolation days will be paid at 150% rate for any personal support units in the base calendar. Retainer units may not be submitted on the day marked as the provider is in isolation. So as you can see, the calendar on the top right-hand corner has some check marks. On the days of those check marks, on the retainer days, the units would change to 0. Next slide, please.
So I'm going to ask the questions that people have asked in reference to this, since it's about personal supports. Can a family member provide music services through the telemeth tool and be considered day service?
So the services that are provided must meet the scope of our meaningful day services. So I would refer you back to the waiver application that define the scope of community development services, day habilitation services, and such. So music services are not necessarily a service under our scope of services. So we would need more details related to what specific support and habilitation is being provided.
Rhonda, can you talk a little bit about the definition of personal supports?
Sure, absolutely. So personal supports, as outlined in our approved waiver program, is available for family supports waiver, community supports waiver, and our community pathways waiver. They are habilitative supports to support people with in-home skills development and also community engagement and integration. Given the current state of emergency, we expect or anticipate all these services will be provided in the home. That can include assisting the person in learning skills to become more independent in their home, such as cooking, taking care of their house, personal hygiene and such. So there's additional details outlined in our waiver application, in addition to information and other PowerPoints we have shared.
Rhonda, for people who do not have 28 hours of personal supports per week, but are not receiving their meaningful day, is there a way to utilize their, hold on, it moved up really quick. Is there a way for them to utilize their day budget for personal supports increase?
Yes, there is the opportunity to move money within your current budget so that if there's services you're currently not receiving due to the state of emergency, you can move those funds to your personal support. We'll be providing additional information during tomorrow's webinar, in addition to posting some provisions for self-direction later today.
Family members have been providing personal supports since mid-March without documentation or demonstration of onboarding family members. Can providers still bill for those supports effective mid-March?
No, in order to bill for services, you're going to have to make sure that you meet the minimum requirements. And remember, in our onboarding and staff training flexibility, family member training can be waived. But there are some requirements related to criminal background checks that would need to be completed, in addition to documentation of service delivery.
Did you say that everyone with at least 28 hours of supports will automatically get 30 more hours per week, Monday through Friday only?
To clarify, individuals that are currently authorized meaningful day services and have 28 hours of personal support hours or more a week will be authorized an additional 30 hours. The additional 30 hours are provided to support the person because their meaningful day service provider has closed, and be able to provide additional support for them during that time.
For family supports waiver, how should any additional PSS hours beyond the cap be requested? Is a modified service funding plan required or a PCP revision needed?
It's a great question. And part of what we've attempted to do per the Deputy Secretary's directive is to streamline and make access to requesting services as quick and easy as we can. So we're not going to use a modified service funding plan process for any service need that is COVID-19 related for health and safety. We're going to utilize a new service authorization form that we'll be sharing in a few slides. In addition, we have revised our cost detail sheet so that only the cost detail sheet would need to be provided if you're requesting increases or new services you don't currently receive.
I have about 5 or 6 questions about isolation, so I'm going to combine them all. One is there a limit on isolation days? The other one is we have a number of people in isolation as per Dr. Fetter's instructions, but they're not COVID positive. Can we still access isolated days? And then please define isolated due to contraction of COVID-19.
So I think the next chapter is all about our increased rate in isolation. Patricia, so do we want to start to go through that and then address those questions?
Sounds like a great plan.
rate. So our next section is about increased rate for supporting participants. And so the DDA is implementing these increased rates for directly supporting participants that have a positive COVID-19 determination and therefore are isolated to account for increased costs for the provision of services while also maintaining the person's health and safety. The increased rate is available for the following services only: community living group home, supported living, shared living, personal support, and nursing services. Nursing services include our nurse consultation, nurse health case management, and nurse case management and delegation services. Next slide, please. In order to be eligible for these increased rates, the person must have that positive COVID-19 determination. Participants who have been exposed to the virus but have not been determined to be positive are not eligible for the increased rate. Providers must provide direct support for participants with the positive determination in order to receive the increased rate. Remote and telehealth services are not eligible for the increased rate. Providers and participants self-directing must maintain case notes and documentation of the service delivery, such as the date of service, the service provided, time of service, and name of the person that provided the service. In addition, they should maintain the date of the positive determination for the virus, the source, such as a COVID-19 test result, determination by a physician, local health department, GO team, testing site, and other sources, and the name of the person present for that determination. For participants eligible and receiving direct support services in accordance with this guidance, the DDA can increase the rate up to 50% to account for the added risk and cost. For eligible participants, the increased rate can be requested beginning the date that the person was determined positive and may be billed up to 21 consecutive days while the person is in isolation. Information such as the positive COVID determination and case notes must be submitted to the DDA upon request. Next slide, please.
Increased rate for supporting people with COVID-19 in community living / residential. To bill for the increased rate, the DDA is using the existing PCIS2 billing process. Currently now known as in the system. The days identified as isolation days will be paid at an increased rate of 150% of the current authorized rate for the community living group home services, including add-ons as set forth in the participant's person-centered plan and budget. Update attendance and recertify your sites. So as you update the attendance in the system, please make sure you recertify your site so the changes will take effect. Next slide, please.
A service called COVID-19 Supported Living Isolation Rate was added to the revised Community Pathways non-FPS invoice. To bill for the Supported Living Isolation Rate service, you will submit the invoice for 150% of the PCIS2 daily rate, including add-ons, for the isolation days to the regional office along with the 1500 form. Additional guidance regarding billing for the service can be found in the revised invoice instructions that will be posted along with the invoice on DDA's website. Next slide, please. For shared living, to bill for the isolation rate, providers should use the current process for requesting budget modifications to add this amount to the person's contract. What will be a new process is that providers will then use the revised Community Pathways non-FPS invoice to bill for the isolation days using the COVID-19 shared living isolation rate service added to the invoice. You'll want to refer to the revised invoice instructions for further guidance on billing for these costs. And as always, you can contact me with any questions on billing for this service. Next slide, please.
Increased rate for supported people with COVID-19 and personal support. Providers shall use the checkbox function on the new PCIS2 isolation day calendar to indicate which days the person was isolated. The days identified as isolation days will be paid at 150% rate for any personal support units in the base calendar. Retainer units may not be submitted on a day marked by the provider as isolation day. Next slide, please.
For personal support, nurse consultation, and nurse case management and delegation services provided under the self-directed service delivery model, the current agreed self-directed rate for those services cannot be increased by more than 50%. The participant shall sign timesheets and invoices and send with supporting documentation to the fiscal management service provider for payment. The fiscal management services provider should submit claims using the existing procedure codes for these services. If personal support or nursing services are already authorized and the person meets the criteria for the increased rate, it can be applied now. Next slide, please.
Hi, this is Peter DeFries. For nursing services under the Community Supports Waiver and Family Supports Waiver, the DDA will add new isolation versions of those services who are currently providing, to those providers who are currently providing nurse health case management and nurse case management and delegation services as follows. There will be a new service called Nurse Health Case Management Isolation and a new service called Nurse Case Management and Delegation Services Isolation. If the provider is not currently authorized to provide nursing services to a participant who needs them, they shall submit the COVID-19 service authorization form to the regional office to add these services for the participant. The regional office will add both the standard nursing service as well as the isolation version. Providers shall utilize the PCIS2 generated invoice to bill for the isolation day rate for 15-minute increments of nursing services provided to someone who is isolated. Those rates will be at the 150% rate as discussed previously. The DDA invoice submission process remains unchanged. Invoices should be submitted to the DDA headquarters as it is currently done for participants in family supports and community supports waivers, along with the supporting CMS 1500s to make the claims. Services use the same procedure codes as noted in the invoice. Next slide.
For nursing services in the Community Pathways waiver, we have added 2 new drop-down options to the Community Pathways non-FPS invoice. COVID-19 nurse case management and delegation isolation rate and COVID-19 nurse health case management isolation rate. To bill for the nursing isolation rate services, you will choose the appropriate COVID-19 service and enter the number of units, and the invoice will calculate the amount using the isolation rate, pre-populated isolation rate. Invoices should be submitted to the regional office as is currently the process, along with the 1500 forms. If you are not currently authorized to provide nursing services to participants, you will submit the COVID-19 Service Authorization Form, or DDA COVID Form 1, to the regional office to add these services for participants. The regional office will add the standard nursing services as well as the isolated version to their plan. Next slide.
As mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, this is an address where you can send additional questions. As Patricia mentioned, we may do additional webinars on the additional hour since there were so many questions. But in the meantime, as providers are working to add this, to do the billing, If you have questions along the way, please feel free to contact the DDA service desk.
Next slide, please. So let's open it up for questions, but before we do that, let's be sure that we answer those 3 questions prior to Rhonda we went into this chapter. And let me just revisit them. Is there a limit of isolation days? We have a number of people in isolation per instructions for Dr. Fetter, but they are not COVID positive. Can we still access the isolation days? And please define isolation due to the contract with COVID-19. So I think we answered that during the presentation, but if there's any clarification, Rhonda, is there anything else that we need to add to this before I go into the questions in the chat box?
I would just add again, as we've shared on the slide, that the positive determination can come from various sources, right? So it can be an actual test result. It could be a determination by the physician, the local health department, instructions from the GO team or the testing site, or other sources. So based on that, then the person could be considered positive based on those determination and can receive increased rate up to 21 consecutive days.
Okay. Calling the person on the phone who receives personal supports to check in to see how they are doing is a billable service, correct?
Under our telephonic and telehealth guidance that was issued from the Secretary order, there is the ability to provide services remotely. CMS has included specific language in Appendix K related to personal care supports that could be provided over the phone for personal care. And so that's what we're referencing, which is also noted in the guidance.
Rhonda, can you talk about payments for state-funded people only that are not waivered?
Yes, I was just going to state that all the provisions that we have within our Appendix K and our guidance applies to both participants in our waiver programs and state-funded services. The guidance will also note if it applies to both service delivery models. But everything we're talking about today and is noted in our guidance does apply to participants in state-funded services. Valerie, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to add that they should follow the same billing process as laid out for the waiver services for the state payment only people. There's no difference.
What about families who took their individuals home during this time? Is there a payment, or does this fall under the reduction retainer days?
For family members who may have taken their loved ones home, taken them from and out of their residential program to have them home with them during this time, a residential provider could submit a claim for a retainer payment up to 18 days. Other options include the ability for the residential provider to hire the family member as staff to provide residential services in the family member's home, considered an alternative service delivery site. And then in this situation, with proper documentation, they can bill as a present day.
What exactly needs to be done in relation to the background checks for family members?
So in our guidance related to staff training and onboarding, there's an information specific to background checks. There's ability to conduct background checks using individuals' names, date of birth, and social security number. It's our understanding that the options for fingerprinting has opened up, and so that's another option for providers to be able to use.
So we understand, based on the response from the Deputy Secretary Simons during the DDA webinar, that personal supports providers who are providing virtual supports are able to bill for an entire scheduled shift provided that some services has been provided and the individual is unable to engage for the entire scheduled shift. We understand that this correlates to the 1 hour guidance to the day programs. Example, that they can bill for the entire 6 hours. Can you please confirm that?
So that's a great question. At this time, DDA has only issued guidance related to meaningful day services in terms of the minimal 1 hour requirement. We will discuss your question further and provide additional guidance related to that if the decision is to follow the same process.
So when should we start using the new change forms? We have a couple of plans in process currently.
You can start using the form immediately. It should be posted to the DDA website today if it's not already posted.
Is there no way to pay family members for the service they provided? I think Rhonda just answered this. So I'm just going through now some more questions from folks here in reference to this topic. Okay, I'm gonna read this one slow. How do we build supports for persons who are displaying dangerous behaviors due to not sheltering in place and socializing with groups of people throughout the community? These persons have been relocated to a site where they are the only individuals for a period of 14 days of isolation. Per Appendix K, number 8, well, these persons would meet the criteria outlined in the category. Separate the people due to behavior challenges, other circumstances associated with COVID-19, and on and on. So how do we bill?
So services can be provided in alternative sites. So if you were separating an individual because of behavioral challenges or concerns, the service can be provided in an alternative site, and that can be billed as a present day.
So this is very similar, but I'm just going to read it because it's a little shorter version. But people are isolated even without being COVID positive, awaiting tests, and need to do the same with them whether test comes out positive or not. So why not isolate a waiting test? Thank you for that recommendation and comment, and the DDA will discuss further and provide further guidance with that. That's come up several times here about people who are not positive but are being quarantined or isolated because they've been exposed. So there's several of those questions, and we'll gather this and share this with the Deputy Secretary for further direction and guidance, because you guys are out there where the rubber meets the road, and we want to be able to elevate your questions and concerns. Dr. Fetter has advised that people who have been hospitalized but not tested positive for COVID-19 must be isolated for the 14 days and supported by staff in full PPE. Shouldn't this staff also be eligible for the increased rate in light of the fact that they may not be exposed, even though not yet testing positive? So all those three questions that I just read are very similar. We will elevate this and be able to provide further guidance in our coming webinars. This is really good discussion, folks, that you're sharing with us and recommendations. Valerie, Rhonda, would you like to add to that?
No, I agree with you, Patricia.
No, I agree as well. Thank you.
Okay, same one. And these are all from our primary advocates here. Like, see, same thing about the testing and isolation. How old does a family member need to be in order to provide personal services?
They need to be at least 16 years old or older based on our revised provisions within Appendix K. Staff can be hired at age 16 or older.
So I've got 8 questions, and they're all identical. So I don't know if we did a great job, but it says, how many isolated days are available and can we use?
You can use up to 21 consecutive isolation days for the increased rate.
All right. Can residential and day services be provided if an individual in a residential is in isolation?
Yes, if the meaningful day services are being provided remotely and the person is isolated, then yes, services could be provided by both providers.
Okay, then there's questions a lot about, could there another matrix be used for the 21 days, or could it be more days? So the DDA determined this based on the 14 days quarantine and then some guidance from the CDC and from the local health departments up to the 21 days. We are going to look to see if maybe people are needing more time to redetermine that, but right now we have, 21 days. And if we need more, I think the guidance says that, contact the DDA for an authorization to exceed that. Is that correct?
That is something we can consider, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to do a couple of more and then we'll go on to the next chapter. Are we able to use nursing services for everyone in isolation? Once a resident is positive, the entire home is designated as an outbreak home and all residents are in isolation.
So if you meet the criteria that we discussed related to isolation for a positive determination, then yes.
Just for clarification, is DDA making a distinction between quarantine and isolation? Just want to be sure.
Yes, there is a distinction between isolation and quarantine. Isolation is used for people who have a positive determination, and quarantine is used for people who are to self-isolate because they've been exposed, but do not have a determination, a positive determination.
Okay, I think you just answered 3 questions related to that with that answer. So I'm skipping right down, and I'm going to, so this one, you just answered this one, but I'll read it. If a person was not tested, but everyone else in the house tested positive, can the untested person get isolation days since he or she presumed positive?
Yes, if there is a positive determination, then yes.
So Rhonda, if I heard you correctly, you implied you can be presumed positive by any other resource, doctors, health department, etc., that are symptomatic, that are required to isolate. You do not actually have to have been tested and determined positive for a test?
Yes, that is correct.
How will this work in several people are positive with an increased rate and others in the home have share hours?
I think that,
Oops, go ahead, Rhonda.
I was just going to say, again, if there is a positive determination that the individual is positive COVID-19, then that would be applied to all of them, including the shared hours.
Valerie, would you like to add?
No, I just wanted to add that for that particular person who has been determined positive, if they are assigned the additional hours, those additional hours will be paid at that higher rate.
Okay, I'm gonna stop here with the questions. I'm gonna go through the next section, the forms, and then I'll open and I'll continue reading questions. So I'm gonna turn it over back to you.
Yes, thank you. So as we've mentioned in previous webinars and during our presentation today, we have created some new forms that we're going to be using. So to streamline the request and authorize those new services and also meet CMS's requirements, we've created a new service authorization form referred to as DDA COVID form number 1 that will be used by providers, and we'll talk about on the next slide. We're going to use a person-centered plan supplemental authorization that will be used by the DDA regional office to upload into LTSS for person-specific authorization. And we have revised the cost detail sheet. Next slide, please. So to authorize services quickly, such as the behavior support services, nursing, and respite, that do not require prior authorization before accessing, and to provide additional dedicated support for community living group home, supported living, and personal support for people currently authorized, we created the service authorization form. It also includes the option to request assistive technology for people to support remote services and other assessed technology needs like tablets and applications. For these service needs, this form will be used, and therefore participants and providers do not need to complete the traditional modified service funding plan process or submit an LTSS Maryland revised person-centered plan. To request additional community living group home, supported living, or personal support services for people currently authorized, the provider shall first review current authorized hours within PCIS2 and also
Repeat that. We
consider
lost
those
you,
additional.
Rhonda.
Yes.
We lost your
Yes.
sound. Can you go back and repeat?
Yeah, start from the beginning, Patricia.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm sorry that to authorize services quickly, including the behavior support services, nursing services, and respite services outlined in Appendix K that do not require prior authorization from DDA before accessing, and to provide additional dedicated support for community living group home, supported living, and personal support, the DDA created a new service authorization form. It also includes the option to request funding for assistive technology for the participant to support remote services and other assessed technology needs like tablets and applications. For these service needs, this form will be used, and therefore participants and providers do not need to complete the traditional modified service funding plan process or submit the LTSS Maryland revised person-centered plan. Prior to requesting additional community living, supported living, or personal support hours for people currently authorized, we encourage providers to review current authorized hours within PCIS2 and also take in consideration the additional shared daytime hours authorized that we talked about today. Providers then, based on an assessed need for additional dedicated hours for a specific person, should complete the service authorization form for any additional person-specific dedicated hours needed. For the community living, supported living, and personal support, you would enter the number of hours under the applicable service noted here on the form. You will enter the start date for those services and enter the end date if known. As per CMS requirements for services to be based on an assessed need, providers shall include a few sentences to inform the DDA what the additional staffing need is. You should enter 1 to 2 sentences to inform the DDA of the risk is needed, you should inform the DDA of the risk if needs are not addressed. You should also enter 1 to 2 sentences of how this requested increase in services is mitigating this risk. And finally, as a person-centered service delivery system, and as per CMS requirements, you need to enter the date that the participant or the legal responsible person has agreed to the increased services. The form should then be submitted to the DDA regional office. We have established dedicated email addresses listed in the guidance and also included on this slide. The DDA regional office will review requests daily, seek additional information as needed, and send decisions to the provider as soon as possible. The timeframes will vary based on the volume of requests received and the provider's completion of requested information. We hope to respond within a few days or sooner. If you haven't heard from the regional office within 5 business days of submission, please reach out to the regional office director. Next slide, please.
Before we go to the next slide, Rhonda, let's walk this through a little bit. You're good with that?
Okay. Yeah,
All
sure,
right.
absolutely.
So I'm a provider, and are you saying that for this form, I don't have to do a form for 60 of my people? I can put everybody in this one form?
That is correct. Under
Okay.
the left side, where we have participant-specific information, you can list as many individuals as you would like.
So walk me through this. So what if I don't have the LTSS ID number? What do I do?
That's a great question. If you do not have the LTSS number, you can leave that blank and enter the PCIS2 ID number, the first name and the last name of the person.
In that next box that you have right there under services with waive, that is if I'm asking specific for behavior supports or nursing or respite, right?
That is correct. We'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow related to the ability to access these services without pre-authorization. But basically, if you do not currently have those services, then you would just indicate yes under the behavior support services or nursing services, and you will be added and authorized within PCIS2. For respite services, you would indicate the type of hours that you would like to use, the new additional 360 hours that we'll talk about tomorrow.
Gotcha. And then the next section where you say streamline requests for additionals, that is just for the main 3 areas for the community group home, personal support, supported living for the add-ons. Is that correct?
That is correct. That would be used for people currently authorized those services where additional dedicated hours are needed based on an assessed need.
And that's where I need to have the justification?
And then correct, you would need to have the justification that's to the right of those numbers to note what is the need, what is the risk, and how is the requested service mitigating the risk.
And it's just that for that one section, or do I have to do that when I do behavioral and nursing and respite?
It would be just for the streamlined request for additional support. You do not need to do it for the behavior supports, nursing, or respite.
Great. Okay. And then how would I know if the region approves this or not? Is there a section where they indicate this on this form?
Yes, so on the far right, you'll see that the regional office will indicate their decision under the RO decision and note any notes. In addition, in the bottom left-hand box of your screen, you'll see that the regional office director will sign and date it, and they will send it back to the requester.
Thank you, Rhonda. Appreciate that. I just wanted to be sure providers got a really good flow, that we're not going to be getting 20, 40, 60 requests, but they're all going to be at one time. Now, what if I only know the request of just 10 people? Can I do multiple forms like this for my people, or do I have to wait until I get all 60?
You can do multiple forms. We encourage you to streamline and do just a few, but based on your needs and needs that change for your participants, that is an option that you have.
Great, thank you. Next slide. So this opens up for questions. And then what I'm going to do, the couple of next slides, as you can see, is just going to be about a reminder of our trainings that we have. We have exactly 5 minutes for some more questions. So I'm going to just try to read some of the questions that are on the screen here that you submitted. Some of our around is about family and about CPR, first aid, and background checks, and if families are being asked to get CPR and first aid.
And so that's a great question. In our DDA staffing and onboarding flexibilities, there is the ability for family members to waive training. And so you would want to refer back to that. If the family member is known to the individual, if that's the decision of the participant and the provider, then there is the ability to waive that, the training requirements for family members.
Is face-to-face meetings with individuals 4 hours per day, not 6 hours?
So that's a great question. We issued guidance that's from the secretary related to minimum hours for meaningful day services. And under that, you will see posted on our website that if a meaningful day provider provides a minimum of 1 hour of services, it can be remotely or telephonically, it must meet some specific criteria, then you can bill for the whole day as a present day.
Can a family member engage as a contractor instead of an employee?
Yes, I believe that's an option that would be available under the self-directed service delivery model.
Under Appendix K, day program isn't allowed on weekends, correct?
Actually, under Appendix K, we've requested and received approval for flexibility in terms of the days of the week and the number of hours per day and per week. So meaningful day services can be provided during the weekend.
If someone attends a different day program, but we provide personal supports to them, do we have the ability to offer to pay family members to provide day services to them, or does that offer comes from their day program provider?
That would need to come from the day program provider, who would then be hiring the family member as staff.
I'm reading, sorry guys. Some people write a lot and I don't want to miss it either. When providing virtual services, does a modified service funding plan have to be completed?
No, a modified service funding plan is not required if you're providing services remotely or telephonically.
Okay. Some of this already answered, so I'm just going down the line. 21 consecutive days per incident. If a person tests positive a second time, can we assume the 21 days starts all over again? It would start all over again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, at this time, that would be something that we could consider and would want to be notified if someone was redetermined to be positive.
So for isolation days, Rhonda or Valerie, can they be broken up 7 days per hospitalization and 14 days post-hospitalization? Rhonda keeps saying 21 consecutive days.
Yeah, so the requirement is that they would be consecutive days because based on CDC guidance and information that we're aware of is it needs to be consecutive in terms of isolating the individual so that they have the time to recover from the virus. So it's consecutive days.
Okay, we have a minute left and we have about another 25 to 30 questions. And I do want you to know that your questions are very important to us. they will be populated and they will be answered and posted on the DDA website. I'm going to read one more, and then we're going to close our webinar, and just remind everybody about our tomorrow's. Can you go to the next slide? Tomorrow's webinar, and then Thursdays. We are going to be posting the self-direction provisions today in our website. Sorry we couldn't do them over the weekend or earlier, but you'll have them today. One last question is, just still need further clarification. At some point in time, a provider can bill for isolation days if a doctor, we already answered this one, sorry. All right, so some people were not able to get onto today's webinar. We are recording this. We are going to be posting it by close of business today on our website. We are working to see why is it that we had some issues with getting folks able to join us, because we have up to 5,000 people that could have joined us. So we're going to call and figure out what was a technical problem. And so thank you all, and we hope you can join us tomorrow. Have a great day.